Kia ora, I'm Erin J. Doyle. Welcome to my channel. This is going to be a tag video. I'm going to be doing the story idea writing tag, originally posted by Brook on Bythebrooke, which I will leave a link to. So, there's a lot of background noise in the street. This is actually very surprising to me because we're currently at level 3 lockdown. I kind of thought some of the banging and crashing and partying and things which are common in my street might have died down, but not as much as I might have anticipated. I guess some of the businesses across the street are considered essential services and are still allowed to operate, but I'm surprised. Anyway, here we go. Question 1. What is your current story idea that you're working on right now? I'm currently working on 2 different ideas. My primary focus is on my Camino story, which is as yet untitled and was originally an extremely long blog that I was writing, which was a fictionalized thing but inspired by my experiences walking the Camino de Santiago, and which I realized really was a novel and have converted into a novel. But it's really long, and so that needs a whole bunch of work. That's like many videos worth of explanation. So Camino story is one of them, and then the other idea is a sci-fi retelling of The Little Mermaid set in space, which I was working on for NaNoWriMo, and it's kind of my secondary story which I'm going to be working on this year while the Camino story is like being beta read and that kind of thing, assuming that I get onto beta readers. Question 2. Do your ideas begin with characters, plot, world building, or something else entirely? I'm all over the place on this one. I have stories which were like 100% literally dreams I've had, and I think they just need a little bit of tweaking, maybe a subplot introduced, that random thing that happened removed, and they'll be like pretty solid story ideas. I have a story which started off with just a character. I didn't know anything about her, I just suddenly knew what she looked like. It was like she just kind of popped into my head fully formed, and I've had to kind of build a story around her. And I have a story which started off with just the question of what if? Like, I read a lot of vampire fiction and I often find it disappointing in one way or another, and I will eventually one day write a vampire story. And it started off with that question of what would it be like if vampires were actually real? And so I've put like my assorted degrees into that thought process, and I'm trying to write a story that's not plausible, but at least kind of scientifically logical in terms of how the vampires came to be, and I've kind of built a world around that, and the story's kind of appeared throughout it. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the place, I think. Question 3. How do you puzzle piece your story elements together? Do you start with the ending and make your way to the beginning, or vice versa? It probably depends quite a bit on the story. I think when they first start off, I have little fragments and I don't necessarily know where to begin or where to end it, and I'm just trying to build the world. So the idea of beginning and end tends to appear later, but up until my most recent story, the Little Mermaid retelling, I was completely discovery writing, so I didn't really know until I had done a certain amount of work, and then I guess I started writing from beginning to end. But there was so much of the story already existing by that point. I think I probably technically start in the middle and then just kind of work outwards, I think. I don't know. Question 4. How do you know when you want to keep or dump a story idea? I don't know how I used to do this, but about a year ago I started filling in this. Basically, it's a sketchbook where I started doing a mind map for each of my many story ideas so I could get an idea of how developed they were, because they were all unplanned and just kind of floating around in my head. And for some of them, I thought they were super well developed. I could start writing it tomorrow. But then it turned out to just be a couple of like random points barely even a premise. And then others, which I thought were random points, barely even a premise, I ended up having to stick extra bits of paper in just to accommodate. So these days I'm using this as a way of seeing if a story is well developed and if there's subplots and actual characters and a point to the story, or just kind of a vague idea of, hey, it would be neat if, and then like something really random. Yeah, I'm using this as a way of determining if a story's good to keep going with, or at least get going with. Question 5. How much of your original idea for your story is actually used once everything is finished? I think this probably depends on the story. So with my Camino story, I actually ended up breaking it in half. So I've gotten rid of half of it, but both halves will eventually be a story. So I guess 100% of the original idea is in the story. With my fairy tale retelling, 100% is still there. But if I go back to my historical fantasy, it's completely unrecognisable. But I have been working on it for a frighteningly long time. So I think that kind of makes sense. And yeah, I don't think there's anything from the original seed that still remains. The two main characters, like the antagonist and protagonist, are still there. Even the nature of their relationship is different. The character that is now like the villain, like the super villain character, was originally a best friend, if not a love interest, but I think I even changed that maybe even the same day I had the story idea. So again, I guess it depends a bit story to story, but maybe these days I'm keeping more than I used to, just because I've kind of grown as a writer, and so I'm kind of hopefully generating a little less garbage. Number 6. Do you share your book ideas with friends or keep them a secret? I share my ideas, and even as I'm sharing them, I'm kicking myself, because I don't like that I share my ideas, because once you've shared an idea, people start asking you questions or making suggestions, and those are not welcome. But because I'm so excited, I just keep sharing them. And I wish I could stop. I really can't. Yeah, it's a fault. I perceive it as a fault with myself. Obviously no judgment on other writers who choose to share. Number 7. Have any of your book ideas originated with a dream/nightmare? Yes, as I've mentioned. So I think on my list of books that I'm going to write one day, there's probably, I'm going to guess 3 or 4 that are dreams I've had. Number 8. Have you ever had an idea for a story but then seen a similar premise in a book, TV show or movie? I'm sure I have. Like, I have really distinct memories of being like, oh my god, that's my idea! But I also can't think of a specific example. So I think when that's happened, maybe I've just kind of discarded it, whether that's the idea or the concern about the similarity. Number 9. Have any of your favourite movies or TV shows sparked ideas for scenes in your book? Nope. So the Camino story, because it's inspired by real life, there's really no TV shows or anything that are in any way similar. I can't think of an example in my other stories, except perhaps the Little Mermaid retelling. I mean, there's possibly some little, not scenes, but like vague references to the original text or the Disney movie. And I'm not meaning like actual scenes, I'm just thinking like, I've been toying with the idea of like there being a fork being used in an unusual way or something like that. May not even make it into the final draft, but that's probably about as much influence as a movie has had on any one of my stories. And I think that's very understandable given it's the same story and I'm just reshaping it in a certain way. And finally, number 10. what's the oldest story idea you remember coming up with or writing down? So that would be my historical fantasy vampire idea, which at the moment I'm not sure if I'll keep historical fantasy. I might move it more into like just straight out fantasy and never mind the historical part, because Earth's geography is slightly inconvenient, so it might actually be easier to tell it in a completely fictional world versus a real one. I have to make that decision because it would affect the plot slightly whether I do one or the other. But at any rate, that's the story that's been around for the longest. Came up with it in 1999, haven't worked on it in the last 2 years, but am still fully intending to write it at some point. That's the end of the tag, just in time for a very noisy truck to arrive across the street, so I will bid you adieu. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you're new, hit subscribe and ring the bell. All these things really help me and my channel out, and I'll see you next time. Bye!